Hey, welcome back. This is the second part of our lecture on the U.S. food and fiber industry. In this part, we're going to talk about some of the other sectors within the industry. Now, a sector is a distinct part of the economy that's made up of similar activities or industries. So we talked last time about the farm sector, or all the farms and ranches and the inputs they use. Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about that input sector, and the farm input supply sector can be considered part of the farm sector, or you can look at it separately. We'll look at the processing and manufacturing sector, the marketing and distribution sector, and the consumer sector. So the input sector, within the input sector, we've got feed manufacturers, we've got fertilizer companies, agrochemical companies, farm machinery and equipment, hired farm labor. You have lenders who give loans to farms, and then you have fuel expenses. So if we look at each of these categories as being a percent of farm production expenses, we've got feed manufacturers, and this we're talking about feed for livestock. So other farms and manufacturers that are producing feed to feed livestock. That's 39% of total farm production expenses. At 17%, we've got fertilizers and agrochemicals. And then at 25%, we've got farm machinery and farm equipment. Another 25% goes to labor. 6% goes to farm lenders in the form of interest, and 4% goes to fuel. So let's talk about the food marketing sector. We looked at a flow chart in the last lecture that showed us how food goes from the farm gate to the consumer. And this is another one. It's similar, but we'll talk about it again. So food that comes out of the farm gate will go to a broker who buys and sells commodities. From the broker, they will sell it to a processor who adds value to it. From the processor, it will go to a wholesaler. A broker may also sell directly to a wholesaler, especially if they're dealing with something like fresh fruits or vegetables. From the wholesaler, it goes either into retailers, like your local grocery store or gas station, or into food service. So restaurants, hospitals, hotels, any of those kinds of places that prepare food and serve it to consumers. Now, the marketing channel doesn't have to look like this for every product, and in fact, it doesn't look like this for every product. It can also look something like this. So anyone who shops at a farmer's market knows that you can buy food directly from the farm. So farms can sell directly to consumers. They could also sell directly to a grocery store or to a restaurant food service. They might sell directly to a wholesaler who then sells them to food service or retailers. So it all depends on what the product is. They all have a different marketing channel. So now I would like to talk about something called the food dollar. Well, the food dollar is a metric that the USDA came up with to show what proportion of a consumer's dollar goes to each step in the marketing channel. So you can see here on the left side that farm production, so 9.1 cents out of every dollar a consumer spends on food goes to farm production. Then we have 13.2 cents that goes into food processing, 2.5 cents to packaging, 3.5 cents to transportation, 11.4% to wholesale, 14.7 to retail, 31.5, that's a big number. That's going to food services. So there's restaurants and other places where you might get prepared food. And 4.3 cents to energy, 4.2 cents to finance and insurance, so loans and insurance companies, 2.6 to advertising. So this is the food dollar for 2023. The USDA publishes the food dollar for 2 years previous every November. So this is the most current food dollar that we have. So that food dollar represents all of the food goods in the US. But if you were to make a food dollar for different kinds of goods, you would have a different breakdown. And specifically, I want to talk about how the farm share would be different. So if you have a product, a farm product that needs a lot of processing to get to the consumer, like say wheat, the farmer is going to get a smaller share of that food dollar. So if you look at the retail value of a loaf of bread, it's about $2.79 on average in the US. A wheat farmer is only going to see about 11% of that. The wheat has a long journey to go from the farm into the loaf of bread, into the consumer's pantry. Whereas a gallon of milk, the dairy farmer's share is much larger. The retail value of a gallon of milk is $3.89. The dairy farmer is going to see more like $1.25 of that. There's less processing that goes on. The milk gets to the consumer faster. There's less going on in the middle there. So when we look at the food dollar, you can also break it down into the farm share. So this is both what the farm earns as well as what other industries in the farm sector earn, like the equipment manufacturers and the fertilizer producers and all that. That's the farm share. And that's 15.9 cents for every dollar. It goes to the farm and the farm adjacent industries. Then you have the marketing share that is huge. It's so much bigger than what the farm makes. It's 84.1 cents out of every dollar. So you really can't talk about the value of food or the economics of the food system without talking about this marketing share and all of the things that go on within it. So within the marketing share, the largest proportion of that food dollar is going to labor, and then to packaging, and then transportation, advertising, and then energy. That's where that marketing share goes. So the food marketing channel has undergone a lot of change in the recent past decades. And the biggest reason for that is that the types of food we're consuming and how we consume them has changed dramatically since the 1940s. So due to some cultural shifts, does anyone else feel like time goes by so fast and you're so busy all the time, and it's hard to find the time to cook and make food at home and to buy high quality food? That's how I feel. I know a lot of other people feel that way. So these kinds of cultural shifts and the shifts in the way that people feel about work have pushed us more into convenience foods, foods that don't need a lot of preparation, if any preparation. And within that, you've got a lot of processed foods and a lot of restaurant and other food service use. Some other changes in how we consume food are that health conscious choices for food and environmentally conscious choices are in much higher demand than they were in the 1940s. This is obvious just from the rise of like natural food stores or stores like Whole Foods that are so much more popular now than when they first started. So we eat out a lot more than we used to. If you look at 1930s, about 80% of the food dollar was spent on food for at-home consumption. So food from the farm or from the grocery store that was brought home, prepared at home, and eaten at home. Only 20% of the food dollar in the 1930s was spent eating out. But if you look at 2024, we got about 41.5% of the food dollar spent on at-home consumption rather than 80%, and 58.5 spent away from home. So we're eating out more than we are eating at home. And of course, we can't forget about meal delivery services like Uber Eats being included. in that 58.5%, even if you're eating it at home. So food services and processing shares, this 31.5 cents per dollar, and reserve processing 13.2 cents per dollar, those shares are continuing to grow and they're projected to continue to grow in coming decades. Americans are also spending less of their income on food than we used to. So in 1955, the average consumer in this country spent about 25% of their total income on food. Today, that's more like 11.3%. Part of that is that there's more food available more cheaply. So we've become so much more efficient at farming, the price of food has dropped. Another part of that is that incomes have risen. But you can see here in this chart, the blue line is what we've spent on food at home, food from the grocery store, and the green line is what we have spent away from home. So they are much closer to half and half now, whereas it used to be pretty rare that people would eat out. We can't forget about transportation, this 3.5 cents on the dollar of the food dollar spent on transporting food around. We transport more food than we used to as well. And the cost of transportation has decreased as new technology becomes available. Things like better mobile refrigeration systems or varieties of certain products. I'm thinking of a lot of vegetable and fruit varieties, like say peaches. There's now varieties that ship better, more stable, and that's made it possible for us to ship more food farther than we ever did before. Now let's talk about the export market. So not all of the food that we grow in this country gets consumed in this country. In fact, for some foods like grains, you can see here, these bars show the percent of that product that we grow in the US that gets exported rather than consumed here. So for grains, we're up above 60%. More than 60% of the grain that we produce in this country gets exported to other countries. We look at things like oil seeds, so sunflower and rapeseed and canola, that's above 50%, it looks like. Fruits and tree nuts, above 40%. Meat, between 30 and 40%. Yeah, these are pretty big numbers. So why are we growing so much food if we're not going to eat it? Well, the answer lies in a term you might have heard in the news in the last year or so. That's the trade deficit. Well, what is the trade deficit? So when a country has a trade deficit, it means that they are importing more goods or more value of goods than they're exporting. And that difference between the value of the goods imported and the value of goods exported is called the trade deficit. Now, we probably all know this, but Americans really like their stuff. In fact, we're the second largest importer of goods. We import clothes and shoes from Malaysia and oil from Venezuela and automobiles from Japan and avocados from Mexico, plastic toys from China, a lot of electronics from China. We get pharmaceuticals from Germany, bananas from Ecuador, automobile parts from all over. We get a lot of high-tech machinery from Asia and also from Europe. So we have a really high level of import in this country. And one of the ways that we balance the trade deficit is we export agricultural goods. So a few of the biggest exports for the US are actually aircrafts and automobiles, which are obviously not agricultural products. But we also export a ton of soybeans and cotton and corn and beef and dairy. And these exports are some of the things that help us to balance our trade deficit.